And let's get into it. Okay, so distress. What am I talking about? What's distress? So distress is that situation where you are overwhelmed with emotion, okay? Where you can't think straight, you're so overwhelmed with emotion. And it's in that state that sometimes we do things that we might regret, okay? So let's kind of get into that. How does that all work? So distress doesn't come out of the blue, okay? Something happens in your environment, something happens in your human environment, in your interactions with people that, you know, will trigger this off. Or it could be the memory of something as well, but there's something that gets the ball rolling. So let's just broadly think of that as an initiating event or cue. So something happens in the environment and you judge that to be meaningful to you. Okay, so we make a judgment about that event. Okay, so far so good. So there's tons of events happen that we judge not to be meaningful, and we don't get distressed about that stuff at all. But the stuff that we get distressed about, we judge it to be meaningful. And because it's so salient to us, it tends to provoke a strong emotion. Okay? And it's going to be one of the big three emotions. It's either going to be sadness, anger, or fear. Okay. So now we're getting somewhere. So now we're all rolled up and we're experiencing, let's say, anger because of something that's happened to us. What's the next thing that's going to happen? Well, if the anger is of sufficient enough intensity, okay, we trigger the fight and flight response. So I won't get into the details of that here. Suffice to say, we experience some physical symptoms. All right. And the typical ones, you might feel your heart's pounding, you might feel hot, sweaty, shaky, all that sort of stuff. Okay, we tend to overbreathe as well. Now, there's a bit of physiology that goes on in here, all right, and I don't want to get too bogged down in that, but suffice to say, these physical changes, they're designed so we can, run or fight for our lives. But if we're not running or fighting for our lives and we're just sitting there, we end up with this situation of a sort of imbalance, okay? There's literally something going on with our blood gases. We're not going to get into that right now. But there's this profound imbalance that occurs. And it's this imbalance which causes the emotion to start to really run away with itself. Okay, so now we start to feel overwhelmed. Okay, and when that happens, we get a intensification of the underlying emotional state. So in the case of anger, that might accelerate to the point of rage. In the case of sadness, we might get despair. In the case of fear, that might accelerate to terror. Okay, so now we're distressed, right? Now we're distressed. Okie dokie. Now, sometimes this all just settles out of its own accord, and that's all very well. But sometimes things continue, and then we have an urge to act. Okay, an urge to act. And that action is going to be commensurate with the underlying emotional state. Okay, so if whatever's happened causes us to feel anger, and now we're feeling enraged, the urge is to attack. Okay, and typically this is verbal attack, although there's plenty of physical attacks that happen out there. Okay, fear, terror, the urge is usually to escape. All right, sadness, despair. Yeah, we can get different kind of urges with this one. So sometimes it's an escape type response. Some people get suicidal ideation in this instance, and we talk a bit about suicidal ideation in a previous talk. But in either case, it's sort of an acceleration, and it's a behavioural manifestation of the underlying emotion. Okay, so we get an urge to act, and hopefully we don't act on it, because if we do, chances are we might regret it. And hence we have regrettable action as a potential outcome here. So this is a bit of a problem, because now we've done something that we potentially would regret, and we've made the predicament probably worse. Okay, and sometimes that regrettable action then serves as the next event, and around you go. So this kind of referred to as the distress cycle, and why it's, so you might go, okay, well, that's all very nice, but how's that helpful? Well, number one is, if you're someone who's prone to getting distressed frequently, it's helpful to see that because it feels like chaos if that's the case. It feels like chaos. So it's actually really helpful to understand the process that's going on. The worksheet that you might want to download, basically what it does is, I'll sort of emulate it here. It asks you to write down what the event was. Okay. And then it asks you to think about what your snap judgment was. Okay? And then it also invites you to think about what are some alternatives. Okay? Maybe your snap judgment was bang on the money. Maybe you were spot on. Or maybe you kind of jumped to a conclusion. Okay? It also asks you to think about, well, what was the emotion that occurred? Was it anger? Was it sadness? Was it fear? Okay? Or were there deeper emotions? Or were there other things getting activated in you? It asks you to think about what were the physical symptoms. Because the physical symptoms, it's a very key way to recognise that you're starting to get distressed. Okay? The thing about this is it sort of washes over us pretty quickly. It sort of hits us like a tsunami. And before you know it, you're doing a regrettable action. So if you can sort of cue yourself into the fact that you're getting some physical symptoms, your heart's pounding, you're getting sort of tension and shaky, it's very helpful to help you be kind of cognizant of what's going on. And then anyways, let's say you do get overwhelmed, it asks you to rate the degree of overwhelm sort of out of 10. Sort of 1 out of 10, no biggie, or 10 out of 10, like a disaster. If you had an urge to act, or specifically if you did a regrettable action, what was the regrettable action? And then it also asks you to think about, well, what were the consequences of the regrettable action? And it also asks you, what could you do different next time? Okay. It's a bit neater than that though. Okay. So that's, the point of this is, if you're someone who's prone to distress, this is like doing if you like, it's, doctors do autopsies when someone dies so they can figure out what the hell happened. It's a bit like doing an autopsy of why the hell did I become distressed in this situation. So you work through this once the dust settles, you work through this and you get more insight into the process of distress as it's happening. And so that will help you, let's say you recognise you're getting distressed here. Well, maybe you can do something different other than just getting overwhelmed. And there's various skills that we can overlay onto this that can help you kind of get out of it. But we'll leave skills for another clip. So what I would suggest is get the formulation of the distress cycle. I mean, it's only 6 steps there. Memorise those ideally, okay? And then print off some of these worksheets, work through these anytime you get distressed. And hopefully what you'll find is that you're more aware of the distress starting to manifest, and that way you're less likely to do a regrettable action, and that way you'll feel more skillful, and that way there'll be hopefully less distress. Thanks, folks.